Hey everyone, welcome back to Kubrick Corner with me, Sean Wilson. So, there's a new British movie out directed by Joe Cornish called The Kid Who Would Be King, which I actually saw a couple of weeks ago, and I interviewed Joe Cornish about this movie on the great privilege of interviewing Joe Cornish about this. He's something of a cult figure here in America and indeed around the world, actually. In Britain, as a result of the Adam and Joe show, but also, which is a podcast, and earlier than that actual show that he used to do with Adam Buxton, also his directorial debut, Attack the Block, which came out in 2011 to critical success. It was compared to some extent to Shaun of the Dead. It was this idea of London hoodies battling invading aliens on a council estate. It was actually really, really witty and really well done. And obviously, it's been a near 8-year wait to wait and see what Joe Cornish would come back with. I mean, he's worked on the scripts for Ant-Man and the Avengers and Tintin in the interim, but this is the first movie that he's actually directed since then. And I kind of want to draw attention to the fact, before going into the plot, the fact that the movie has actually struggled a lot at the box office, both in America and, as it turns out, in the UK. The UK box office figures have just come out. But this is a classic case in point of box office be damned. This film is actually really, really good fun. And I really enjoyed it. And don't be put off by the box office figures as if any of you film fans ordinarily would be. I mean, if you love cinema, you won't be put off by that. But what the narrative that's being built around this film is that it's struggling. It's a modest little British movie that's not finding its audience. But I can wholeheartedly say go and watch it, because it's really, really good. And the basic just it's an inversion of the King Arthur mythology, in which a young kid named Alex, played by Louis Ashbourne Serkis, son of Andy Serkis, discovers the sword in the stone and is basically tasked with banding together a group of knights to tackle the evil Morgana, played by Rebecca Ferguson, who's about to unleash her dark forces onto the world. And in order to do so, Alex has to unite with both his sort of persecuting mate bedders and also the bullies that persecute both of them. So there is this interesting idea of, what does Arthurian mythology tell you about chivalry and forgiveness and heroism, and how is this sort of turned on its head, and how does it find its reflection in modern day concerns in sort of 21st century school environment, and things like that. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed the film. I think it's what it does is, I mean, it's unashamedly made for younger kids, and I think it is an empowerment fantasy for young kids, but it does so in a way that is open-hearted without being patronising or annoying. I think there are very important lessons to be learned about. There are lots of, and not too subtle, parallels with the political climate here in the UK at the moment. The movie is not backwards in coming forwards in terms of that, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that at this stage in Britain, young kids, get a bad rap in Britain at the moment, and I think that if this is an inspiring story about coming together in a time where everything is becoming increasingly divided, then great. I love the fact the movie doesn't shy away from that. Cornish's skills with set pieces are much more confident than they were in Attack the Block. You've got attacks by like demonic riders on horses coming up out of the ground. All of that stuff is very well done. There's some really nicely choreographed and witty sword fights involving road signs as shields. I mean, that makes up the poster image. And all of this is really, really clever inversion of Britain's longest standing myth. The idea is that this is drawing on British history, and there is an educational aspect to it as well. It's designed to plug younger audiences and older audiences as well, parents and so on, back into the very rich mythological history of this country. And I admire that. I think that's brilliant. Joe Cornish told me when I interviewed him, you don't need to go to far-flung planets or into fantastical landscapes to find mythology. We've got it here on our doorstep. He quite rightly pointed out that, the corpse of Richard III can be dug up in a car park in Leicester. We've got history all around us, and I think the movie taps into that, both thematically and visually. It's really well shot as well. I think the performances are very charming. You've got the dual Merlin, played as a younger man, as an older man. As a younger man by Angus Imrie, who is a real scene stealer, very quirky, with lots of very eccentric kind of hand movements when he's doing his magic invocations, and then played as an old man by Patrick Stewart. I think the young performances of the younger cast are all very, very solid and very charming. I think there's a great, really rousing score by New Wave Bureau that to me sounded like it was influenced, at least in part, by Darth Legacy's score for Tron Legacy, the idea of this electronic orchestral crossover. And yeah, I really, really liked it. And I think it's a shame that it's struggling to find an audience. I think there is an old fashioned air to it. I think it is deliberately designed as a throwback to the kind of live action kids movies that you don't really get nowadays. As Joe Cornish said to me, the marketplace is so commandeered now by superhero movies. This kind of deliberately steps away from that, and it's about real kids in recognisable situations, just with that slight fantastical twist to it. And I really liked it, and I think that, you know, go and watch it if you're in the slightest bit curious about it, or if Joe Cornish is something of a hero to you as he is to me. Go and watch it, and let me know what you think of it. It's called The Kid Who Would Be King, and it's out now in the UK. See you soon.